Those are going to be fallow for next year. I'm going to let them do what they want to do. And then way out back in the... Good afternoon and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. I'm Stephen Dixon, and today I'd like to give you the second part of our garden plan for 2026. The first part was back in November, but it was almost an hour long and we didn't cover quite everything, so I'm going to finish it up. In front of those potatoes and that cabbage, there's going to be a very, very thick layer of dill. Why is that? I'm also going to include a few of the things that we do here in March. Now, as you can see behind me, there's still a ton of snow. We've had 2 snow melts, which you're going to see in the video, but we just got another, about a foot or 30 centimeters of snow last night, and so winter's not quite let up yet. Anyway, if this is something you're interested in, the Garden Plan 2026, then let's get started. Right next to the cattle panels, we've got our little oregano patch, perennial as well. Got a couple of oregano patches in the garden, 2 or 3 of them. You know, we can't have too much oregano. I'm gonna cut back some of this oregano as well. That's growing really close to the ground cherries. Bring it to the kitchen. This is about the last week of June in 2025 while I was preparing the ground cherry video. It's cloudy days. Harvest it and just leave it here for now. That should be good for now. When it starts to get close again, I'll cut some more. And actually mixed in with that oregano patch, right next to it, there's a hyssop and there's yarrow, and often there's ground cherry volunteers that'll grow in that area as well. Now, I transplanted some ground cherries into that area this year, and there were lots that stayed in the garden after the major frost. So we're probably gonna have volunteers there again next year. Another plant that grows right next to that oregano patch is parsley. It was parsley that I had planted in there in 2024, and this year I was able to harvest seed from it. And I planted parsley elsewhere, and so I'm hoping the parsley I planted elsewhere gives us seed next year, and we'll see if there's some volunteer parsley that grows where I harvested the seed. Oh, and right here in front, this is something I'm not cutting back because this is some parsley that I had growing last year, and now it's going to flower, so we're going to get seeds from it, which is really, really nice. But they're not going to shade out the ground cherry. They don't have once they go to flower, they don't grow very thickly. And also I'll be cutting them back as soon as I've got their seeds. The other thing is these plants are going to get really, really big. They're going to get so big that they're going to be bigger than the oregano on this side, and they're going to be putting the pressure up against the hyssop on this side and up against the parsley over here. But by the time they get that size, the parsley will have already given me its seed, and so I'll be able to cut it away. I've already taken 2 harvests from this anise hyssop, and so it'll go to flower, and it'll go to flower through the ground cherries, and so that's just going to be pretty. And the oregano will be starting to kind of finish up for the season when these things get really, really big. They'll be really, really big in about September, and then their big harvest is October, end of September, beginning of October. There's some harvest in early September, but it's mostly late because they're so slow growing. Okay, next section of the garden is the area that I call the nettle patch, the stinging nettle patch. Stinging nettle dominates that area. However, we harvest it heavily in the early spring. We practically cut it right down to the ground every time we harvest it because we love to eat it. It's delicious and very, very healthy. And because we do that, well, it slows the plant down a little.
early April to mid-June, we're harvesting stinging nettle, very, very healthy, right down to the ground. And then in about mid-June, that's when I'll be transplanting millet and popping sorghum into this section of the garden. Here in this image, you can see popping sorghum with mostly barley growing in front of it. That's what I had in 2025. It's once again, this section is the section closest to the pumpkin patch and closest to the rain garden. And so there's a lot of water in there for those plants to take advantage of, and you don't have to water them at all. Now next to that, and you can still see them there, is some Dino kale, and I'll be planting Dino kale there again next year. I'm not going to move that one. So far we haven't had any major problems with bugs with the Dino kale, which is nice. That's another one that I start in small pots and transplant. The whole brassica family, I start in small pots and I transplant. You can transplant anytime from, let's say, mid-May through right through the summer, actually. Next part of the garden. Now we're going into what Magani and I like to call the pants, the pantalon, because they look like three sets of pants here. The east pants, the middle pants, and the west pants. Right there, I'm in the east pants. And I'm showing you our onion and carrot area. Now, I haven't given you the conclusions of our onion and carrot instant garden experiment video. This was, let's say, the baseline section, because we planted onions and carrots into the ground in the garden here. But then we had our other two, what we called our instant gardens, but that's coming later. I was happy with how they did this year. And so, because onions like to have a lot of water without being waterlogged, obviously. And carrots like a loose friable soil. I'm probably going to add some sand into this area next year. Just a little bit, a bag or two. A bag or two of sand, just to lighten the soil up a little bit for the carrots. And also that might help as well with the weeds, make it easier to weed. We had lots and lots of sow thistle in there this year. We ate a ton of it in the spring because I kept picking it, because carrots and onions do not do well with weeds. And so I was picking it and picking it and picking it and picking it. And eating it and eating it and eating it. And it was really good. They tasted a little bit like bean sprouts, because they were growing through all that mulch, and so they were nice and blanched. They weren't even green. They were white and crunchy and juicy. Quite good. Sow thistle. If I let it grow, these onions won't grow properly, because this sow thistle will become 20 times bigger than them. But when it's this small, it's real easy to pull up. Now there's still roots underneath, but I just keep pulling it up. So that's our carrot and onion patch. Okay, behind the carrot and the onions, that's going to be our area with coral sorghum and millet. As you can see, everywhere where I'm putting sorghum, I'm also putting millet, because I have different, each area has a different type of sorghum. We got the dwarf sorghum, the popping sorghum, the Williams sorghum, and here it's going to be the coral sorghum. But in every area, there's also going to be millet beside, or in front, let's say. The taller sorghum will be in the north side, and the millet will be on the south side. Something like that. The taller sorghum, the millet will be on the sunny side, because the taller sorghum is taller. And I'll likely put in some teepees in there for some beans. And there's always borage that comes back in that area. Okay, let's continue. Now in the back part of the portion of that garden, and in the back portion, all along the back there, that's where we plant peas, because it's kind of the shadiest, coolest part of the garden. And so the peas do well there. And we got the coral sorghum and the millet that's separating the onions from the peas. A nice, huge barrier, because the peas don't like those onions. Okay, in the next part of the garden, there's the base of the middle pant leg, where there's going to be peas again. And then in front of those peas, there's some volunteer potatoes that come back every year. I'm going to let them do what they want to do. And that's on the left that you see on the screen. On the right, there will be cabbage. That's one area where I'm gonna plant cabbage again, just like this year. Now, In front of those potatoes and that cabbage, there's going to be a very, very thick layer of dill. Why is that? It's because after that, it's the tomatoes. Tomatoes and potatoes, it's not really good to mix them. I have to say though that I had some tomatoes growing in my potato patch this year and they did fine. I didn't even trellis them, so they're like field tomatoes, but I always forgot about them and they ended up always getting eaten because they were growing on the ground hidden by the potato plants. It's not good to plant tomatoes by potatoes because potatoes can carry the blight and they don't necessarily show the symptoms the way tomatoes do. And so that's why it's important to keep them far apart. And so there's going to be a nice thick layer of dill between them. And so here in the tomato section, going to be just like this past year, just like the last couple of years. The companion plants will be dill, lettuce, basil, and calendula, maybe some marigolds. The tomatoes just love growing with all of those, and I explained that earlier.
I explained it in part 1 of this video back in November. So as you can see some bolted lettuce here. Rather than harvesting the whole plant, we leave the roots in place and we let the lettuce go to seed, bolt up. It gives these really tall flower spikes that attract pollinators at the same time as the tomatoes are flowering, and the spikes are very strong and they act as a trellis for the tomatoes that are growing all over the place. And dill does pretty well exactly the same thing and is about the same height. They're both about 4 feet tall.
Okay, next section. Here we are in the west pant leg. So at the very back will be peas, and then right in front of that there will be some volunteer potatoes that have been growing every year, and also some cabbage. And then in front of that, there'll be beets. And it's going to be the first time I plant beets there. I had beets on the east pant leg where we're putting the coral sorghum and the millet. And they did well there, but I don't want to plant the sorghum and the millet on the west side because it's too close to the forest. There are too many tree roots there. The beets should do fine because they did fine on that other curve last year in 2024 where I planted the peppers. The beets did fine in that curve that was closest to the forest, and so I think they'll do fine here as well. That's what I'm hoping. I've built, it's actually this section of the garden right beside me here. Here I'm looking at the screen and I'm surrounded by my garden. Anyway, what you can also see to the right of the screen here is the pumpkin patch. And in the pumpkin patch, generally I surround the north and east sides of the pumpkin patch with Williams sorghum and beans with teepee. And I will put teepees with beans inside the pumpkin patch as well. There are sunflowers that grow there every year. And then there are a whole bunch of other little flowers and other things that are in that patch, like cardinal flower and columbine. But obviously the main thing that we're growing in there is squash and pumpkins and zucchinis. Some years I plant the citron melon, which I call the winter watermelon. These are some citron melons sitting on our counter in our living room, actually exactly a year ago today on March 17th, 2025. And they had been harvested in the fall of 2023. So they have been sitting there for a year and a half. We finally used them this past fall. I still had one sitting there a few days ago, but it was almost 2.5 years old and it was starting to rot. So I actually put it outside for eventually the ants to eat them. And I'm going to see if the seeds grow. And finally, in the greenhouse next year, it's going to be a bit different. There's going to be the tomatoes as usual. And I'm going to try my hand at some purple and white sweet potatoes in the greenhouse with the tomatoes. I'm probably going to put them in planters because there's a lot of gravel under our greenhouse. Now, we also have gardens out back. We have the peace garden, which is beside the house. I'll be broadcasting millet in that entire garden, and maybe put a bit of cabbage if I didn't find enough space for my cabbages. And then out back in our camping area, we're going to have the same millet, coral sorghum, and amaranth garden. And we're also going to have 2 instant carrot gardens in the compost garden and in the straw bale garden. And then we have the gardens way out back in the camping area. Those are going to be fallow for next year. I'm going to let them do what they want to do. And then way out back in the forest, we have our 3 wild gardens where we plant the 3 sisters, which we make available for the animals if they want. And we hope they leave us some. So beans, corn, and squash. That's in our moon garden, our turtle garden, and our chinapa garden. And sometimes we have potatoes in that chinapa garden as well. And finally, there's the contour. The contour's got a ton of plants in there, and I'm not going to list them here, but they're well, we got wild grape, wild rose, wild bergamot, evening primrose, green-headed coneflower, New England aster, yarrow, tomatoes, peppermint, oregano, sage, lavender, everbearing and wild raspberries, goldenrod, liatris, elderberry, blackcurrant, Joe Pye weed, stinging nettle, burdock, black-eyed Susan, asparagus, hollyhock, blackcap raspberries, chives, garlic chives, and probably a lot more than that too. And those are the plants that help keep the animals out of the garden. I haven't decided yet where we're putting our black and our purple barley along with our oats and our buckwheat, but we'll figure that out as we go along. I'm always finding extra space here and there. The plan for the garden in 2026. And here's a little bit of what's going on in March. A new bread recipe, working on the nursery outside, getting some plants started, and a bunch of other stuff. Here I'm testing small quantities of some old seeds. You can see some okra sprouting here, and some tomatoes and some corn. I like to do it this way because then I can use them afterwards. It's March 15th and the snow still hasn't let up. So we're still doing lots of experiments in the kitchen. And here's a new one. Look at this delicious bread that Maggie just made. Look at the color of that. Here's what's in this bread. I'll give you the portions pretty soon. First of all, there is this mixture of millet, lamb's quarter seed, and evening primrose seed. And then here we have oat flour that we made from whole oats. We grow oats here. And so we put whole oats in our spice blender and we sifted out the hulls afterwards, doing a 3 sifting process with just a regular kitchen colander. Using this type of colander with a very fine mesh. Here I'm sifting sorghum flour, but it's the very same process for the oat flour. Once I'm done passing the flour through the sifter, I just pass it through again and then a 3rd time too. And each time I catch just a little bit more chaff. And then of course our regular sorghum flour right here. And so this bread, the mixture of flour in it is, there are 5 cups of regular store-bought whole wheat flour. And then the rest is 2 cups of sorghum flour, 1.5 cups of oat flour that we made, and 1 cup of this mixture of millet flour, evening primrose seed made into flour, and lamb's quarter seed made into flour. And that made this. And then, so we're talking, it is 4.5 cups of the mixture of all of these and 5 cups of regular whole wheat flour. So we're talking, it's about 55% regular whole wheat flour and 45% the other stuff. And then added to that flour mix, there are 3 cups of cooked squash. And then in these baguettes, Maggie added Malabar spinach. And it's just delicious.
The bread is still warm, and look at how nicely it's cutting, even when warm. Sometimes when we freshly cook the bread wants to get crushed. Look at that. Very nice. Look at how solid that is, and flexible. Speaking of new bread recipes, today Maggie and I were threshing some of our purple and our black barley. That reminded me that I was pretty sure I didn't include the barley when I recorded the garden plan video last November. And more about cooking, like making bread, something we do all year is we trade our vegetables for eggs with our neighbors. Today there was a really big one and a really small one in the batch. My pots are all uncovered like this. The snow's all melted. So I just put a very thin layer of fresh leaves on top of them all so that they don't dry out, because it's not growing season yet. It's only March 10th today. Like this. It's a nice thin layer so that if it rains or snows, it'll stick and cover. We had so much snow cover that I didn't need to cover them with these leaves, but now I did. And here I just sowed a bunch of walking onions, and it might be a little bit late, but I got a couple pots of wild grape, a couple pots of nodding onions, and a couple pots of cedar. We'll see if there's still enough cold weather in the season for them. And 2 pots of camelina and 2 pots of fennel. March 10th in the greenhouse, 48 cells of homegrown onion seed, 48 cells of homegrown carrot seed, and then 48 cells of different types of kale. Actually, no, sorry, 36 of kale and 12 of turnip. And 72 cells of homegrown lettuce. All this is homegrown seed. And then another 96 cells of homegrown carrot seed. Testing all sorts of seeds inside the house with and without heat mats. Our first sprouts of the season. Some marigolds after 5 days. Well, a single marigold sprout for the moment. And some kohlrabi sprouts. It's either kohlrabi or kale. I'm actually not quite sure what these seeds are. March 16th after 5 days. Kohlrabi and marigolds. And our first velvet leaf. Keep watching after the goodbye and the thank you for some more March gardening activities with some quiet music. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something from it and you found it useful. If you liked it, then please give it the thumbs up and share it with your friends. Like I said earlier, don't forget to leave a comment or a question. And if you haven't done so yet, then subscribe. Support what we do here just by subscribing. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.